Welcome to the Mustard Seed Media video podcast. My name is Bob, and this is the podcast for Drupal web designers. We all love views, don't we? It's the best module ever created. It helps us build lists of things, and it's really, really awesome. But theming views sometimes can be a little bit of a headache. Back a little while back on the podcast, actually episode 23, we did a basics to views theming episode. Today we're going to take that a little bit further with something new, a little chunk of variables that we discovered recently that lets us do some really awesome, more extended sort of views theming. So we're going to show you something we're calling views row theming today. It's going to allow you to theme the rows really in a custom way and to enhance the performance of your site a little bit. So let's start by looking at why this is going to enhance your performance, and then we'll go into actually how to do it. So here's that episode I mentioned, episode 23. You can go back, and if you need a views theming refresher, definitely go back and check this one out. What I'm going to use for an example here is this listing of podcast episodes. So this listing of podcast episodes is obviously a view, and what we've done here is we've got this really sort of extensive layout with lots of different fields and lots of different layout type stuff, really custom HTML to lay this out. And each one of the nodes is laid out in that way. Now normally to do something like this, and actually the way this one is done, is in views we choose it to be a node view instead of a field view. And all that does then is if we jump over to our TPL file, so this is the node-podcast.tpl.php file, all we've done is we've themed what we want this teaser to look like inside of an if statement for a teaser. That works just fine, and so what views is going to do is spit out the teaser that we laid out. It's all fine and dandy. The only problem is, and even a page that's only this long, I think this has 25 episodes on it or something, you start to see this issue, is that for each one of these nodes that is shown on the page, it's loading the entire, it's doing a full node load. It's loading the entire node, all of the information, including lots and lots of stuff that we're not even using here. So that's really killing your performance because it's loading all of this data for each individual node that it doesn't even need. So ideally, we would use fields view instead of a node view in our views. And by doing that, we're only loading the fields that we actually need to load. So we would load just the title, just the description, just the links, and leave everything else. It's going to really enhance our performance. You can see how this could get to be a really big deal when you're scaling your sites up or you're doing node lists that have a whole lot of different views or different items in the view. So what I wanted to do is I always wanted the power of node theming to be able to lay out my individual fields, for example, like here's my 5-star widget, to be able to lay out my body content, have full control over the HTML of this layout in something like this, while still using the views field setting rather than choosing the node setting, because that's going to enhance my performance. So that's what I'm going to show you how to do today. We're going to enhance or theme each one of these rows to be exactly what we want. So let's take a look at this view. This is just a view showing a list of events. It's a field view. And all we've got is 2 fields. We're showing a title and a date for an event. If we look at the HTML, what you're going to see here is we've got a whole ton of HTML. So down here we have our views row. Right here, it starts right here, and then we've got a class for title, a label, a span, and then finally our title. We don't really need all that markup. I don't really want all that markup. I want it to be exactly the markup I need to slim it down and only put in the stuff I need. Not to mention, have you ever tried to customize these classes? If you're not a developer, if you're not a Drupal developer, it's not a fun thing to try and do. So let's make this markup exactly what we want, printing only the rows we want, and do all of this in a very similar way to theming in Node. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit this view, and the first thing I'm going to do is go to the theme information. And I'm going to style my row output. Again, go back to that views theming thing if you don't understand any of this. And I'm going to create a new template file for my rows in this view. So I'm going to create that new template file. I'm going to rescan so it finds it. And you'll see that it's dark now, so it found it. I'm going to get my sample code to start out. Now in this sample code, there are some hints of what I'm going to do, but it's not really spelled out very well for those of us that don't dig a little deeper and might not intuitively know exactly what's going on here. So I'm going to save this, and actually, yeah, so I'm going to save this, and then we'll look at the view. So what we're going to have is we're going to actually see the exact same thing, but what you're also going to see is if I delete this now, I'm overriding this theme, and then I refresh, this is all going to go away. That's showing me that we have control over this. So remember all that markup? Look at where all this markup is coming from. It's a whole bunch of markup, and I don't need it all. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to delete it. Now, here's the magic pieces of code, and it's all related. If you forget, it's all related to this field class stuff right here. This is a safe, sanitized class that we can, or I'm sorry, not field class, field content. But this is a sanitized and formatted output of each individual field. You just have to know the naming convention, which isn't told to you here. So that's what I'm going to show you today. So the naming convention for this looks something like this. Let's look at this. Fields, and then we have the array for the field item. My field is called title. That's just the title. And then we want to display the content. Again, that gives you a little bit of a hint right here of what that is. And then we have our custom fields. And it looks like fields, and then field underscore, whatever your field name is, underscore value, content. So let's look at, find out exactly what that is. Let's say we want to print this event date. So what we can do is we can go back to our theme information. It's the easiest way to find this. And here's my event date. You'll be tempted to put in field event date. Don't do that. You want this ID. Field event date value. So I'm going to go put this in. Field event date value. If I save this now, what I'm going to get, is I'm going to get just the two fields that I put in. Now you'll notice there's no formatting, no anything. It's up to me now to write the HTML, but that's good because I can write really clean HTML to deal with this. And you'll see that all those spans and classes and everything are gone. We do have a span in here that's being put in on the field level, and you can go change that if you want. But you sort of say, so what at this point, right? Let's do something cooler with it. Let's say something I often want to do is maybe I want to make this a list, as maybe views would do. But in this list, I want to have some custom classes to help me identify what this list actually is. So there I've made it a list, fine and dandy. You'll see if I refresh that it turns it into a list. That's great. But what if when I look at my code, this UL, I want a custom class that tells me what month this was added in, right? So just an example, give me a class that's June or July or January, so I can theme each one differently. Of course, maybe this isn't a real world example, but it's probably gets your brain going on what I'm talking about and what you could be doing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add another field that is my post date. Let me go find it here. And the format for that, I'm just going to give it a custom format. And I'm going to say capital F is PHP for just show me the date. So I'm going to update that. Now I have this in here. If I save it, what you're going to notice is that this date doesn't actually show up here. So if I refresh, you're going to see that that date doesn't show up anywhere in here because I'm overriding this fields. It's only going to be showing the fields that I want. So what I want to do is I want to add a class to this. And my class name is going to be printing that field as my class. And that field happens to be called created. So I added that as my UL class. And now what's really cool, if all went well, is if I look at my UL, each UL is going to have a class of the day or the month that it was created. Now all of these were created in July, so they're all going to have the same ones. But this means you could add, you can basically use view fields to interact with the rest of your row to do things like add classes or any of that stuff. Hopefully you can see the power in this. This is really, really cool. And what you can also see is that this is just like theming nodes. We can now grab our field, put it right in our template, get rid of all the extra HTML that we don't want, write our own HTML around it, have some things interact with each other, do some crazy stuff with our row, all very simply. To me, this was an aha revelation moment, and I can't wait to use this more. Hopefully this is helpful to you. As always, you can find these podcasts over at mustardseedmedia.com/podcast. We're doing a new thing where we're asking you to chip in for each one of these podcasts we release. So please, if you want to see these podcasts keep going, developing, be more frequent, please go ahead and chip in every time we put a new chip in up there, and we'll continue to deliver these to you as long as there's a demand for them. Also, check out my audio podcast over at geeksandgod.com. That's it for now. Let us know what you want for upcoming podcasts. If it's something we feel like we can address in 10 minutes on a podcast, we absolutely will. Use the contact form over at mustardseedmedia.com/plunge/contact and let us know. That's it. We'll see you next week. Have a great week.